Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. We got a great show for you today. We're talking about weird pedals. We're talking about Bora and Red Bull. We're talking about Zoe Bäckstedt. We're talking about esports worlds. We're going to ask, and I want all the audience out there to think about this, what would be the worst race to run backwards? We'll get to that later in the show. Joining me today, welcome back, Dane Cash.
Hey, Caley. How are you?
Doing great. I'm really excited about this. I think you and I are more excited about this than Ronan and Abby. Ronan, little under the weather over there for Ronan, and Abby fighting with MailChimp trying to get her newsletter out. One of our least favorite things to do every week. If anybody out there works for MailChimp, you have a lot of explaining to do for yourself. I think that you should maybe be a little bit ashamed on what this thing is. Is that too mean, Abby?
No, I mean, you're right, though, because the odds of my computer crashing at any moment are high whenever I use MailChimp, so...
Yep.
Yep.
But the good news is everybody out there will get another edition of your newsletter. So, with that, let's get on to the show. We're going to kick off with a bit about Red Bull and Bora. This is just a story that we've been following for a couple weeks now. Dane, what is the update?
The update, it's sort of like a no news is good news situation for Bora and Red Bull. The proposed deal that we all know about if we listen to this podcast, which is that Red Bull is going to buy a 51% stake in the company that owns the Bora Hansgrohe team. That deal was sort of sitting in a review period with Austrian antitrust authorities, and the period passed without anybody, filing any official complaints, which means sort of there's the period has passed, which means that they've gotten the go-ahead from the government to make this happen without it being some kind of, sports monopoly, I guess was the concern. So yeah, antitrust authorities have signed off on this, and the deal is moving forward. Bora Hansgrohe put out a statement saying, kind of like it's official, and then nothing else. So we still don't know what this means, how much money's coming in, what they're going to be doing with all their new money, sponsorship, whatever. But we do at least know that it's going ahead.
Does the team name change or anything like that?
Again, apparently we're going to find out more details this season, according to the statement. Who knows? Because both Bora and Hansgrohe have signed on, or had signed on for the future to be title sponsors, at least in the past. So unclear whether that will remain the case with Red Bull coming in. Assumedly, Red Bull's going to spend all their money to not have that be the case, but who knows? We really don't know at this point. All we know is there are questions about that. There's questions about, are they going to use their money on, bringing in new riders? Are those new riders going to be riders who already have Red Bull helmets, like Wout van Aert? Any number of other stars who race for the Red Bull brand but are not part of the Bora Hansgrohe team?
Well, now Zoe Bäckstedt, right, Abby?
Yeah, last week it was announced that Zoe Bäckstedt got picked up by Red Bull. They've supported women in the past. It's not like a new thing that they've picked up a female rider, a solo female rider, but Zoe is their newest addition, as they're no longer supporting Pauline Ferrand-Prévot or Chloe Dygert for the 2024 season. Chloe actually last year as well. It's Zoe Blancavas and Evie Richards, the current female Red Bull athletes on the racing scene. And obviously Blancavas for SD Works Pro Time, so she's on the road as well as Zoe for Canyon SRAM. And then Evie Richards is primarily mountain and cross, mostly mountain. So they do support women's racing, and I think they're not getting more involved in women's racing, but they're definitely going for the younger crop of riders now, more so than Pauline Ferrand-Prévot. So it's interesting to see. It's cool. It's cool that they're backing someone like Zoe.
That would be a not bad core to build around if they were to want to try something like that.
You mean pull all those riders together into a single team?
Yeah. Which, again, that's what everybody was talking about right away with the men's side was, is Wout van Aert going to come to Bora Hansgrohe now? And obviously, who knows? But it certainly sounds like a nice start.
Well, I do wonder if Bora Hansgrohe will start a women's team.
It is interesting. There's not always a direct connection between sort of the individual riders and teams, and I don't think it's not necessarily the case that Red Bull even wants to pull all these riders into a particular team. Like, they like the sort of solo athlete thing. They always have liked the solo athlete thing. They go after these very specific athletes for specific reasons to hit specific markets and do something very, well, it's one giant marketing company, right? So they know what they're doing. but it certainly would make sense that at least some of them end up all in one place. I mean, I can't imagine that we don't see some of these Red Bull helmet athletes ending up in one place.
Is it not slightly different now, though, in that if Red Bull own a majority share in one of the World Tour teams, then riders outside of that World Tour team are effectively sponsored by the owner of another team, and there is presumably a conflict of interest there. Is that not? Has that dynamic not shifted a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's why there's some questions here. Inner-Ring on Twitter put something up, I think it was yesterday, about this, how there is language in the UCI rules that sort of says this is like not something you can do.
You can't have two teams with the same sponsor in one race.
Well, that's also true.
Yeah.
But that you're unable to have, the language of the rule that the Inner-Ring Twitter account has up is, quote, the members of a UCI World team may have no link with the members of another UCI World team. Which, okay, that's pretty,
I wonder what
so
the Yates.
vague.
I wonder what the Yateses think of that rule, given that they're in.
yeah, exactly. It's vague enough to be, I don't know, who knows, but
That is such
but
a
also,
ridiculous rule.
There are multiple teams on Specialized bikes.
Yeah.
So
right. But this is a step
Specialized
further
don't
where it's
own
like
the team.
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
Sort of related but unrelated. Everybody's talking about the Red Bull Formula One team and how that operates and all. And one thing I haven't seen mentioned is the fact that Red Bull actually own two Formula One teams. The second having previously been known as AlphaTauri. That team has just changed its name to Visa Cash App RB, which has
Terrible.
been widely described as the worst team name ever in Formula One. And I've been following some of the sort of commentary around why that has been determined the worst name ever. And I might just advise those people who think that is a terrible name never to get into cycling, because their biggest issue is that the team has just adopted the name of a sponsor rather than having an identity of its own, which I mean is just, that's everything we are over here.
I think like relative to Italian second division teams, this is pretty tame. Like I feel like if Androni
Giocattoli Cider Mech
on an F1
but what I also
Can you imagine Gianni Savia running an F1 team?
I mean,
That
I can
would just
imagine
be
it.
glorious.
Yeah.
I think what's more interesting about that though is that actually Red Bull have sold the naming rights to that team for the first time. Previously it was Toro Rosso. When they first acquired that team from Minardi, the original Italian basis behind that squad, they changed the name to Toro Rosso. They kept that name for, I think, well over a decade, and then they replaced it with AlphaTauri. And AlphaTauri is, of course, Red Bull's own fashion label, the clothing brand. And now they've renamed it Visa Cash App RB. There was some reporting that the RB doesn't stand for Red Bull. I mean, clearly it does. But
don't they say the same thing about like RB Leipzig and things like that? Like, don't they pretend that it doesn't? It means something else.
I think there may be some reason why they have to sort of But anyway, the point I was going to make was it all just speaks to the sort of wider strategy going on here, and the whole Red Bull marketing philosophy and acquiring teams. It's fascinating every bit of it, and I'm sure whatever's about to happen with Bora will be equally fascinating.
I would imagine we see Red Bull helmets disappear from elsewhere. Riders that aren't on the team, that sponsorship can get taken away, right? Like Abby just mentioned.
Apparently,
that
apparently, if you request a Red Bull sponsorship deal, then you are forever in the black book and never going to get a Red Bull helmet deal as an athlete. If you're an up and coming athlete or something, and you reach out to Red Bull, hey, I'd love to be a Red Bull athlete, then you go into some book and you're never going to be a Red Bull athlete. They have to come to you. And yes, those deals
that's ridiculous.
It can disappear. But what I'm more interested in is, given that it's such a sort of prestige thing to have achieved in an athlete's career, and an athlete in any sport to don a Red Bull helmet, will we see the entire Bora squad get Red Bull helmets, or will it remain a select few, or how's that going to work? Because if everybody gets one, it sort of loses a bit of its appeal. But then how do they select a couple of leaders or whatever within the squad who do get them and who doesn't? And
I mean, on the subject of like who gets them, you would think that their big stars would get them, but at the same time, we know that Primož Roglič has brought his "I want this specific kind of salad" mentality to this team, and I don't know. I mean, the whole branding of Red Bull coming into road cycling in general is kind of wild to me. Like, I drink Red Bull, but I also eat McDonald's. I don't think any of the rest of you probably drink Red Bull. And
Not without vodka.
Okay, yeah. Maybe that's the one. Maybe they're just appealing to people like post-race celebrating the win or whatever. But it is weird that they're going to spend all this money on a sport where a lot of these people would never touch a Red Bull. Unfortunately for them. I mean, I don't know how people stay awake without stuff like Red Bull, but
Perhaps Roglic could be the face for Red Bull sugar-free or something.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious if this has anything to do with the Netflix show, Unchained. Red Bull, the impact that the Formula One Netflix show has had on Formula One and Red Bull. And yeah, if the show, the now Tour de France show has any impact on the decision to join cycling, regardless of that the Bora team was supposed to be in the show and then really
weren't interesting enough.
Yeah.
Like literally, got followed around for a month and then got cut completely. I mean, one thing we can be absolutely sure of, the one thing we there is no question about this, is that, like I said before, Red Bull is a marketing company, right, that happens to make drinks. There is going to be a heck of a lot more marketing content coming out of Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, whatever that ends up becoming. Like, that is going to be a very different just level of content creation, we'll call it that, coming out of that team than has been in the past. I wouldn't say Ralph Denk has been sort of like notorious for stepping into that space particularly effectively.
I feel like there's an opportunity here for them to go full on in that direction. I mean, they're the German team, are better placed than anybody in the Pro Peloton to get a Jägermeister sponsorship. And if they could be Red Bull Jaeger, that would be the coolest team name. It would be a real marketing bonanza. It'd be very exciting.
Jägermeister, one of the original sponsors, shirt sponsors in soccer or football or whatever you call it also. So, I mean, yeah, there's history there as well.
Yeah.
Can I be my dad for a second and just interject with my useless fact once again? Because
absolutely.
Caley, you mentioned that they're a marketing company who happen to make a drink. They don't actually make a drink. They outsource production of Red Bull to Rauch, who manufacture the drink for them. Red Bull just happened to sell it for,
Gone are the days of Peter Sagan cooking over a one of the Bora stoves, that sucks the steam into the middle and in the shower and stuff as advertisement for the team. That sounded weird, but
yeah,
I think that's one of the positives to come out of this, Abby.
I'm wrapping this little segment up. Welcome back, everybody. We have some updates on something I know you were all wondering about. Esports Worlds. Ronan, what's going on in Esports Worlds? It's going on to the Whoosh, right? The MyWhoosh?
Your wish, my wish, all our wishes, yes. All our wishes have come true, and that the UCI has.
Jesus.
What I'm actually talking about is the UCI and MyWhoosh's announcement of what the next 3 editions of UCI Esports World Championships is going to look like. Listeners to our Geek Warning podcast will know that I was in Abu Dhabi last week. I actually stopped off there on my way home from Adelaide in the Tour Down Under because this MyWhoosh announcement was happening. There was a press event there that I was attending to sort of get to know the MyWhoosh platform, hear from both MyWhoosh and the UCI as to what their plans are. And yeah, basically they've completely rejigged the entire sort of format of what the Esports Worlds is going to look like. I think the last few years, I say I think because after the first edition I didn't really watch any more of them because it was pretty difficult to watch. Sorry to anybody who enjoyed it, but I found it wasn't all that appealing to me. It was effectively a race to the bottom of a climb and then a fitness test or a power test up a virtual climb to decide the world champion. And to their credit, I think the UCI have sort of realised that didn't make for the best possible virtual race. What they've done with MyWhoosh now is come up with a 3-stage format that will make up a live final that will take place with around about 30 riders in Abu Dhabi, and that will follow a sort of qualification process where basically any of us on this call, anybody listening can participate in a qualification system that will whittle down riders to a semi-final that will follow a similar platform to what I'm about to describe, and from that semi-final then we'll get 20 riders who will qualify for that sort of grand final in Abu Dhabi. what wasn't exactly clear is how the other 8 or 10 riders who will be in the final will qualify. Tadej Pogacar was there as well, and I asked the question of the UCI, how will the other riders qualify? And there was quite a vague answer. And as I started pointing towards Tadej Pogacar, there was a lot of sort of laughs and jokes from the presenting crew from the UCI and MyWhoosh. So what I took that to mean was that they're leaving some spots open for riders who they wish to invite. Anyway, I'm rambling about what the actual grand final is going to look like. Is 3 stages. The stages are sort of devised to suit various different rider types, with the idea being that we're not really going to know who is going to win the championships until the final finish line on stage 3. Stage 1 is, it's going to look a bit like a Formula 1 qualifying session, in that there's a 1.7 kilometer lap that they're going to use. There's going to be a 300 meter sprint within that lap, and riders have 15 minutes to set their best time across that 300 meter section, with points awarded to the top 20 fastest times. So obviously that's going to favour sprinter type riders who can excel over 300 metres. Stage 2 is going to feature an 8 kilometre lap. That lap will have a significant climb in it. A climb is going to take around about 8 minutes, I believe. And there's going to be sprint at the bottom of that, which will also obviously favour the sprinters coming into the bottom of the climb. But there's going to be also sprint points at the top of the climb, double points at the finish line not far after the top of that climb. So that'll obviously favour those who can climb. And then stage 3 is effectively a points race. I'm blathering on about here now, so I'm going to whittle down stage 3 to effectively a points race. And the UCI and MyWhoosh's hope is that the winner will be crowned on the final sprint to the finish line.
Great. Good. Sounds good. Sounds great. I like racing on Zwift, for example. It's an incredibly effective way to stay fit. I was doing it in kind of like the gap in between mountain bike season here and ski season. I was trying to stay fit, and it was great. I was doing like a couple times a week. Very much enjoy it. Like participating in it. Just not a good entertainment product. I'm sorry. Like, I've tried to watch these things before. It's just not, right? Like, I kind of get other esports, right? Like play Fortnite or whatever. You can go be in a Fortnite tournament, and you know there's world championships, and it's a massive thing. It probably dwarfs professional cycling, to be perfectly honest. But I'm sure it does, actually. So big deal. Big deal. But like the difference there is that you can't Fortnite in real life, right? Like you can't go Mario Kart in real life either. Like I think that's, for me, that's kind of the fundamental problem, a potentially insurmountable problem with this sort of the whole concept here, which is that outside bike racing also exists, and so therefore like that is a generally better entertainment product. But again, couching all of that in the fact that like personally I really enjoy doing this myself as an activity. I shouldn't say enjoy. It's really painful and it's kind of terrible, but it's very effective and find myself doing it anyway. But like, are they expecting an audience for this? Are they expecting...
Just on your point there, I would say one of the other big differences between the other esports that are easier to watch and more enjoyable to watch is that there's actually visually there's a skill set that you can appreciate the competitor or the player has that I don't have watching them. I mean, I used to watch F1 esports before it sort of failed recently, and might not have been real, but actually sometimes the racing was more exciting than real F1. It was certainly closer, and you got overtaking moves, and there was a skill there that you can appreciate. The skill in esports cycling until now was a physiological or fitness based one that wasn't really, you couldn't really appreciate it just watching on TV. The webcams we got sort of had just a rider puffing and panting away on a stationary bike, which wasn't all that exciting to watch. I put it to MyWhoosh that that's what cycling esports is missing. They assured me they're working on that it will, that they and the UCI also were at pains to point out that they want to make this a discipline of its own rather than bringing outdoor riding indoors, which I think most indoor riding fans and cycling esports fans will agree is what's required. So that's sort of work in progress. I tried MyWhoosh about 2 years ago. I haven't tried it since. Kind of was expecting to try it when we were on the MyWhoosh press tour, but they took us on 3 cycles, all of which were lovely. One was through the desert, one was on the Yas Marina F1 circuit, and one was on a new bike path they're building around where the velodrome will be in Abu Dhabi. So we didn't actually ride any virtual riding or MyWhoosh on the MyWhoosh Prester, which felt a bit to me like going on a Colnago launch and being asked to ride specialized bikes, but anyway, so I do plan to try it again. I'm sort of working on a much bigger feature all about MyWhoosh. Of course, I'll have to try it for part of that. I'm going to say that without delving too far into it now, what they were saying, what they were telling us, and what they were telling us our plans are for the platform, pretty exciting, or it certainly has potential. But I mean, yeah, well, time will tell whether or not this format is actually more exciting to watch.
I do want to advocate in favor of e-racing. Like I've watched the Zwift e-worlds before, and I actually like it quite a bit. Like it's impressive how much watts they can do. If you know anything about watts and watching people ride hard, then you know that it's pretty impressive how hard they can go. And there's definitely a little bit of skill involved of when to use your efforts and then throw in all the power-ups and stuff like that. And there is some, you do have to practice what you're doing before you get thrown into Worlds. So I think in that sense, like I enjoyed watching it, especially if they keep the races short and sweet and you're not sitting there for more than 40 minutes watching a race, then 100% I'll watch it. I also think it's important to point out how much reach e-racing has compared to regular on-the-road racing. It's obviously really, really hard for riders from certain places to get to Europe to race in the pro peloton. And with the addition or the invention of e-racing online, riders from all over the world can race against Ashley Momin-Pasio, for example. Like it's really cool in that sense. And the fact that more riders on the women's side especially are being recognized for their power output and what they could possibly do on the road in the e-world, what e-racing brings to the table for cycling, even if it is very different from on-the-road racing.
They also see potential. I mean, given the size of other esports, it's so weird to call this an esport because it's so different from other esports, but they see potential in the growing audience that is other esports as well. And I think that is a good thing for the sport as a whole to tap into, because more eyeballs is good.
Like Ronan and his F1, right? Like that's a better comparison than, like I was saying, like Fortnite or something like that, right? F1 is much more similar to bike racing than Fortnite. And they've sort of figured it out, as Ronan was saying. So maybe it's possible, and maybe MyWhoosh is headed in that direction.
They certainly have enough disintegrated, but I think
and MyWhoosh has enough cash to try to figure this out, right? The only sort of enjoyable e-cycling experience I've had was actually at the Harrogate Worlds when Zwift was relatively new and they were running sort of races at their little clubhouse thing, and it was like a live event, and they flew Dave Toll over, and Dave Toll was doing like
can I interrupt
commentary
you there, Caley,
while they were doing it, and it was
that was in a
great.
pub, and you had drinks.
Yeah,
that helped.
Yeah,
you enjoy it.
Yeah, it was.
There's
that's
the answer.
What I need to enjoy.
That's the solution.
E-cycling. That is what I need currently. I'm not saying it's impossible that this will ever be good or popular or anything. I'm just saying that right now, I better be in a pub if I'm going to be enjoying this particular sport personally. Your mileage may vary.
The other thing, and speaking to people much more in the know about esports cycling than I am, the likes of Christopher Schwenker from Zamunike, who I know was an Escape Collective member, he was and MyWhoosh especially were very sort of keen to push the sort of they were very keen to push the idea that they are focused on esports rather than trying to juggle every aspect of virtual cycling in a way that, you know, other platforms maybe focus on being able to replicate outdoor routes, and Zwift obviously focus on, you know, providing a platform to train and a social element to it and all that. And I think Zwift have often been criticized of not focusing enough or doing enough for the esports aspect of cycling, and that's what MyWhoosh have sort of said from day one, is that we want to develop this as an esports platform. It's they're about the racing, and as you mentioned, Caley, unlimited cash seemingly. So if someone's going to give it a go,
because where's the money coming from? You were in Abu Dhabi to do this, so people could probably draw a line between 2 points there.
Where's the money coming from is a question that I asked countless times over the 4 days that I was there. For some strange reason, we've got a very vague answer in that there's investors from what I understand, the UAE government is linked to those investors, let's say. I will delve into all of this in much greater detail in the article that I am working on. I can't really sort of skim over it for a podcast. It needs a sort of deeper dive. But yeah, let's just say no lack of funds there to make this work.
I think it'd be good for the sport if they can. I just don't like it right now. So with that, we should move on to pedals. There's some weird new pedals, interesting new pedals from Ekoi. Ronan, you spotted these on a French website. They agreed to share their photos, so we've got a story up on escapecollective.com right now. The gist of this is basically that, well, they sort of changed the interface with the shoe, so the cleat sort of sits a bit recessed into the shoe and is more aerodynamic. And what was the claim? It was like 8 watts of savings or something like that. I mean, maybe at 100 miles an hour is perhaps what they were testing at. But what are these things? Explain.
Basically, the French brand Ekoi, I've looked at Speedplay, who first moved the pedal system onto the sole of the shoe to make the pedal smaller, and they've basically said to Speedplay, "Hold my beer," and they've gone and redesigned the entire sole of a shoe to incorporate a much lower profile. We haven't actually seen the cleat, so I can't speak specifically about the cleat. But what we do know is that they've come up with this new pedal system that looks incredibly low profile. Looks very minimalistic, looks very lightweight, and then they've incorporated the cleat system into the sole of a proprietary shoe sole, and that it sort of works in two ways. In that, one, it hides the cleat and presumably part of the pedal below the sort of the line of the sole, if that makes sense. Kind of like the sole hugs the pedal when you're clipped in, and it also means that with the cleat below or higher, I guess this is very confusing because I'm trying to the cleat is from what we understand, podcasting is not a good medium to describe this. It's a very visual sort of thing to try and explain, but from what we understand,
it's like imagine if the sole of the shoe was made of putty or like clay, and you smooshed a pedal into it. That's essentially what it looks like, right?
Well, we haven't actually seen the sole of the shoe, so we can't say exactly.
We think.
But yeah, so what I was going to say was that one of the potential benefits of this is likely that in hiding the cleat and the pedal within the sole, there's probably an aero gain there. Presumably that's where the 8 watts is coming from. But also, I think sort of appealing to a much wider audience is the fact that these look like they should be pretty easy to walk in, especially compared to typical sort of road style 3-bolt or triangular shaped cleats, which are often they have you doing tap dancing whether you want to do or not, across anything other than any kind of slippy surface. So these are much more like off-road pedals in that the cleat is effectively below the tread of the sole or above the tread of the sole.
Isn't it like, I mean, it's not mass, but like in terms of how, like the volume, it's quite large.
It's much longer looking than most pedals you'd see. It's both more minimalistic and much longer looking than any other pedal on the market. I guess in terms of minimalist design, Speedplay is the only one that comes close with a lollipop, but even that is much more sort of solid looking than what we've seen from Ekoi today.
It looks like somebody took a Shimano cleat, put it on a piece of paper, drew a black line around it, and then kind of made it a little bit longer, and the black line is the pedal.
Yes, that is a good description.
It's a good way to describe it. Do we think it has any legs? Do we obviously asking people to change like their whole shoe is kind of a big deal. It's a
I don't know if it has legs, but it definitely has feet.
To get over here.
I was waiting for someone to do it. Oh man.
I deserved it. I deserved every bit of that. So
I'm not sure the listeners deserved that. But.
Yeah.
Shut up, Ronan. You would have said it if I didn't.
I know, and you would have given me a hard time.
I literally said had legs, and I saw all 3 of your eyes just light up, and you're waiting. You're all waiting. But returning to the question, is this going to exist in a year? If I could say it that way, maybe.
I think the fact that both Nice, Metropole, Côte d'Azur, and the Burgos BH teams are now using the pedals since their December training camps and in racing tells us that this is something that Ekoi are taking very seriously. It's not a one-off prototype. They've got multiple riders using them. It seems to be sound enough design for use like this. Presumably, had there been an issue, the pros would have found them before they started racing on them. Two things sort of cast a little bit of doubt of it. Number one is obviously the fact that you need a proprietary sole design to work with the pedals. From what I understand, Ekoi are considering and probably are willing to license that design to other shoe manufacturers. So if you get someone on the pedals one time, then you have a much better chance of keeping them. That said, there's brands like CD and Northwave who offer Speedplay specific 4-bolt sole patterns, and they, as good as they are, like I'm a fan of them. I have a pair of Northwave shoes with a 4-bolt adapter, and it improves the Speedplay design no end. They still didn't gain all that much traction. So will something that requires its own shoe gain that much traction? Probably not. The other thing that casts a little bit of doubt on it is just how sort of, not going to say negative, but just sort of how unsure the CEO of Ekoi himself is about this. He said they've spent €2 million so far on this project. They acquired the design from the initial inventor. They've been working on it for 2 years, and he himself was admitting, look, we're probably not going to challenge Shimano and look with this. Whether it becomes something or not, we're not really sure. You'd have expected him to be coming out sort of all guns blazing, like, this is going to change the world. And from I've actually spoke to someone who has tried these since, and what that writer was saying was that it actually is a very good system. It's light, stiff, low profile, good adjustment mechanisms, generally a good design was this writer's comments. So it's by no means a gimmick, I don't think. I think the 8 watts is definitely very optimistic. Maybe they tested it and found 4 watts, which is probably more realistic if you took like the worst pedal design and then come up with something better than the existing best. And perhaps then they just thought, well, there's 2 pedals, so we're going to double our result. Maybe that's how they got there.
Yeah, the wind tunnel testing versus flat pedals and snow boots or something like that for your fat bike. But I can't imagine it would be that great. But that doesn't mean people won't gravitate towards it, particularly at the sort of the performance end of things. I mean, a couple watts is a couple watts, right? And we're sort of we're in an era now where it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest to see people start to trend that direction. And then all it takes is a Tour de France 1 on these things, right? And all of a sudden you've got a pretty good market.
They need to work with some team that's not Burgos BH or.
Well, this is the thing. Apparently, from the report in Lecycle.fr, that UAE, Ineos, and Visma have already approached Ekoi looking to test the pedals. I think it's one of those that first it'd give it and then it'd take it away, and that even if there is only 4 watts, 4 watts would be a heck of a saving from a pedal system. Let's say there is 4 watts to be saved here. You save 4 watts by moving to the pedal system, but then how much, probably not in terms of watts lost, but how much extra headache do you have in then having to change your shoe supplier or the shoes that your rider finds most comfortable, or are those shoes as aerodynamic as the shoes you're currently using? All these other questions that sort of arise when you have to factor in that you have to use their shoe also. Does it end up a wash? Does it end up a net 1 or 2 watt gain or loss? Who knows?
I could see Visma, Lisa Bike, going this way because they use nimble shoes, and nimble shoes are kind of like semi-custom anyway, and could potentially swap a different sole in there. It'd be feasible. Could see them going toward it first, but I think they would probably need to see actual gains, right? Like they're going to go test this stuff themselves. They're going to go put it in a velodrome or whatever and see if they can see those actual aero gains, and if they can, like I said, a couple watts is a couple watts.
I still think the extra the off the bike marginal gains are the biggest appeal here, in terms of just being able to walk easier in these things. If you think about walking a pair of off-road shoes versus walking in a pair of shoes with road cleats, it's night and day in terms of comfort and safety and all sorts when you're off the bike. So I still think that could be the bigger
certainly for folks like us, right? But I don't think Tadej Pogacar cares that much about that.
No. Well, Tadej maybe because he's on the podium so often, but most guys know.
All right, it's enough about pedals and cleats and everything else. We are going to take a quick break and come back with a debate. All All right, so this question came in. I believe the original poster was Eugene, but I had to sort of follow this one back through a couple different threads on the Escape member Discord. So here is the question for all of you, and I think that the actual answer to this question is quite obvious, but we can keep going after that. What race would be the worst run backward from its normal route? And Eugene points out that Milan-San Remo would be terrible. Paris-Roubaix would be chaos, basically. Flanders wouldn't be particularly good either, because Flanders this year, well, the men's race starts in Antwerp and has like 100-something K of sort of flat boringness before we get to anything interesting. Is it Milan-San Remo, though? Is that what would be the worst race run backwards?
Elimination race.
Just keep putting people onto the track. Road race, Ronan.
Strada would be pretty bad also backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What Sanremo is. I'm looking at the profile right now of the race. I couldn't even really think of what is the first 100K like, because why would anybody watch the first 100K of that race? And it is, in fact, quite flat. There's really nothing there. So I think that's got to be Sanremo.
Imagine the whole peloton lined up like in that square where Strada finishes, and then trying to race down that uphill.
Ooh.
See, they wouldn't race it though. They would just ride down it, and
it would be neutral, so it would be super dumb.
Yeah. I mean, there probably are races, especially like stages of the tour and stuff, that the profile quite closely resembles that of San Remo backwards or something. Maybe just not as long.
Mm-hmm.
You just tend to. I think most of these would end up in bunch sprints or something.
Yeah. If Milan-San Remo was run backwards, do you think they could even get riders to do it? If it was just like a guaranteed bunch sprint, but you had to ride almost 300 kilometers to get there?
That's kind of what it was for a while. And I think you would just get that again. You'd get, in the past, 5 years or so, it's suddenly become not the sprinters race, but it was a long stretch where it was. And I think maybe you would just get the sprinters really embracing a chance to be monument winners again, because they have not really had a chance ever since we've started to see small attacks winning every year after year after year.
I want to see Flèche Wallonne backwards. I want to see them race down the Mur de Huy.
What would be the most dangerous? Roubaix, maybe?
Roubaix,
can you imagine just
definitely.
like a fresh peloton going into Carrefour backwards? Like
just in the velodrome.
Was it 15K into the race?
Can you
imagine riding in a peloton backwards?
I do think if a race ended on a downhill like the Mur, I can't think of anything where that is actually the beginning of the race, that it would be flipped like that. But that would be pretty wild if the race ended going down the Mur or anything like that, really.
What race would be better backwards?
I can say I think Lombardia would be very similar, and they actually kind of do this because they switch each year on and off. They go from Como to Bergamo, Bergamo to Como, and the route. Although the route changes, obviously, because they're doing that, the character of the race doesn't change much because there's nice climbs kind of on either end. So I think it's kind of been shown. You can run Lombardia either way. And yeah, they actually do make slight tweaks to the route. But it's like if you climb the Madonna del Ghisallo at the end of the race or the beginning of the race, it's still a cool climb to do. And you're still going to get enough climbing over the course of the day to make the climbers the contenders for the race. So I think Lombardia kind of is one of the best races to do either way.
What if the Tour de France started on the Champs?
That seems like...
Well, it did in 2003.
Yeah, I was going to say, that seems like a reasonable thing.
It worked for the women last year.
Yeah.
But then where would it end? Nice.
All right.
I think, actually, Flanders is one race that could work also, in that obviously the climbs are much more difficult when the riders have all those kilometers in their legs, but there's so many cobbled climbs and so many cobbled sectors, and they're with the way the route is now, they're so spread out across the race that actually, you're coming into somewhere like Antwerp for the finale, chance of crosswinds and stuff around Antwerp is always pretty good. You could
but they're going down all the cobble climbs instead of going up them.
Well, I mean, yeah, in my head I was thinking you slightly deviate the route, that you still end up climbing them rather than descending them.
Yeah, run it backwards.
Oh yeah, that's...
Descending down the Koppenberg would be
You're not
terrifying
doing it right,
in a peloton.
Ronan.
Are you kidding me?
In which case that's another example of the elimination race.
A race ending at the bottom of the Koppenberg, that'd be wild.
Yeah. That would be I think Flanders and Roubaix both in contention for most dangerous if they were run backwards for slightly different reasons, right? Like Roubaix because you just stack up all these things right at the beginning, and Flanders because you'd make people go downhill, down cobbles, which is just there are a couple downhill sectors on the Flanders route I've done the Sportif a couple times, and they are genuinely terrifying. Like 50 plus K an hour down cobblestones, done them in the wet a few times. It is not something you really want anybody to be doing. Anyway, fun little question. I think Milan San Remo has to be the winner for the actual question, which is what would be the worst run backwards. Most dangerous, Roubaix, Flanders. And then best, Lombardia. We could run Lombardia backwards because they already do, as Dane says. Let's take a quick break and come back with some Weekly Pain. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for this week's Weekly Pain. No categories this week. We've just got some limericks because, frankly, you all seem to like the limericks from last week. I did get some heat on the Discord from David. David, I know you're out there. I'm going to try to do better this time. Apparently, I got some of the metering wrong with last week's limericks, which, in my defense, I did write all of the limericks in about 15 minutes before the show started. So I put a little bit more time and energy and effort into this one. But I'm still not making any guarantees that I got the metering right because I'm not a poet. I'm just not. All right. Ronan, Abby, you haven't played this game yet, so I need to explain the rules, don't I? The rules of this game are very simple. I have written a limerick for each of you. If you can guess the last word of this limerick, you get your point, basically. So there's only 1 point available for each of you today. If you can't, then you don't get your point. And just a quick reminder, limericks, the first 2 lines and the last line all rhyme. So it'll go rhyme, rhyme, and then 2 other lines, and then again, rhyme at the bottom. Keep that in mind. Ronan says he doesn't know what a limerick is. He just thinks it's a city in Ireland, which I find hard to believe. I thought you just learned these in school or something. It's not an Irish thing?
No.
Okay. Well, it's an American thing, apparently, and I'm going to read you some limericks.
If you can't tell, I just cannot contain my excitement for Weekly Pain.
For the limerick challenge, Ronan is so excited about Well, Ronan, let's just start with you then. Mm-hmm. I've got a couple here. They're all in different categories. My idea was to put them into sort of the category where the contestant would have the least amount of expertise. So let's go to women's racing for Ronan. Here we go. You need to give me the last, actually in this case, it's 2 words at the end of this limerick. In 25, where will she trekkie? The teams line up to inspeckie. Her speed and grace, who leads the race for the signature of...
Lotta Kopecky.
You gotta say it again. You gotta say it at the right time. There we go. See, Ronan, you do know. You got it.
I'm a limerick man.
Ronan gets his point. Congratulations. All right.
Something tells me that the ones that don't have Lotta Kopecky as the rhyme are going to be harder. I'm just gonna guess. You may have a bit more of a challenge here.
You're taking it easy on Ronan because he doesn't want to be here.
That's right.
Do you like how I had to make up words to rhyme with Lotta Kopecky?
Yeah,
because
I was impressed.
Not easy. Not easy, right? I mean, Lotta Kopecky. We had what do we had? We had Trekkie and Inspeckie in that one. All right, Dane, you're up next. Oh, which one of you do I give the tech one? So I should say that these are all in the news this week, and in fact, we've talked about a number of them today. So Dane, this one's dead easy. I'm giving you a free point here, basically. A new pedal set spotted ahoy. For the cyclist, a new toy. Oh boy.
Oh god.
New cleat mount. It's Aero, no doubt. The latest new pedal from...
It's a good thing I was paying attention. Like sometimes I do kind of glaze over when Ronan talks about things, but I was listening to...
It's one word, Dane. It's one word you're looking for. Take the point away from him.
I was listening to him say Ekoi this week, so I know this one. But.
I personally think that was my best limerick of the week.
You didn't have to. Yeah, you didn't stretch it. That was good.
Do you ever listen to radio shows where they have a quiz where they've made the question exceptionally easy just to get people to they need a question to give away a prize. It's as easy as possible. So
that was kind of bad.
I think the Kopecky one counts as that for this.
Oh yeah. Both. Both of them so far have been. Yeah.
All right.
Nice tough one.
They're all easy this week. Let's be honest. I mean, the reason why I had the limericks as bonus points last week is because it's a relatively easy game. I think it's certainly a lot easier than the normal category game. But that's why we're mixing it up. You know, sometimes we won't have any weekly pain at all. Sometimes we'll have this game. Sometimes we'll have other games. Abby, your limerick this week. With wings on their bikes, they'll pedal.
Bull.
In the race, they'll surge. Damn it.
Actually, pretty good.
You gotta at least let me read the limerick.
Sorry.
I worked hard on this,
Okay,
Abby.
read the whole limerick, Caley.
With wings on their bikes, they'll pedal. In the race, they'll surge on the level. With force and might and primas. All right. The Bora Boys now ride for...
Red Bull.
It's
Thank
a
you.
good, I mean, it's a creative use there, Caley, but I would say that level and Red Bull do not, questionable rhyme.
Oh, come on. All right, you get to write the limericks next week, Dane. I think it's close enough. All right, well, a point for each of you. Congratulations, all. And I believe with that, it's time to head to Escape After Dark. This week's Escape After Dark, it's not actually particularly spicy, other than we might swear a little bit at some broadcasters, but we're going to talk about a story that Joe Lindsay wrote this week about how to watch pro cycling, both in the U.S. and elsewhere. Just a quick sort of rundown of that and some chat about some of the workarounds that we've found thus far. Joe and I are now sharing a Max account, for example. If you are a member, you can keep listening. And you make sure you sign up to that member Uber feed and get the whole extra bit of the episode. And if you're not a member, you listen to the free feed, well, this is where we cut things off, and we'll see you next week.
If you're not a member, you
Thanks
can also
for-
keep listening. You just have to sign up first.
That's true. Head over to escapecollective.com/join and sign up, and then you can listen to the whole thing. I should mention this as well, because people keep tagging me in things on Discord and stuff. If you are a member and you're trying to get the member feed and you can't find that link in your email or whatever, head to escapecollective.com/member-only-podcasts. Feel a little bit like Ian Trello reading out the entire URL. But if you head there, you can get the link to the member-only feeds. If you're not signed in on the website, you can't open that page. So only members can get in. That's the easy way to get it. With that, we'll see all of you next week. Stick around for Escape After Dark.